So, despite this being a copy of the superhero movie, this chapter was surprisingly well put together. This is the Dragon Ball Super Manga Chapter 98 review. And as you may have known, the last 6 or 7 months or so, I've lost count by now, have basically been rehashes of the superhero movie, and sometimes actually worse than that original movie. But this time around, and last month actually, it's actually been really solid. And this time around has been no exception, because there are some things of note I wish to bring to you right now, which really impressed me and improve on the movie by quite a bit. Now, of course, it goes without saying, Gamma 2's sacrifice looks just as good as it did in the movie. And you also feel like the team is actually more constructive, more solid, like a unit. Everyone's working together very solidly. The Kienzan's there to good effect. You feel like Android 18 is actually contributing, aiding, so that means the fused fat Gotenks actually causes some more damage to Cell Max, and then he actually loses an arm as well, which is really good as well. But one of the biggest things, and actually a bit of a W for Krillin, considering that the manga world is really not a friendly place for Krillin because Toyotaro really doesn't like the character. But this time around, you actually get to see Krillin's solar flare. That, I believe, was not in the superhero movie, or if it was, I completely forgot about it. So finally, Krillin is actually contributing with something in an even more relevant way, because we all thought that Krillin was involved in the original movie version of the battle with Cell Max, but now he's even more involved in aiding the entire group being able to do their thing and stop Cell Max. Now, okay, I think you probably might remember one of the dumbest things from the movie, and that has something to do with Gohan dropping the senzu bean that was handed to him by Orange Piccolo. Thankfully, that doesn't happen. What actually happens is a really well choreographed entire sequence which involves quite a lot of characters, especially the likes of Pan, who then discovers her ability to fly. Gohan gets the senzu bean properly and is able to not look silly, because in the movie, you just get, oh, thanks, Piccolo. Oh no, I dropped it. Oh, silly me. I wasn't wearing my glasses. Silly me. You don't really need the comedy in that moment because it's meant to be the big battle. But instead of Gohan just dropping the bean that was handed to him by Piccolo, it actually gets blasted off the tip of Piccolo's finger, which is actually kind of funny, by Cell Max himself. It then goes scurrying away through the air. Krillin goes, oh no, my senzu bean sensors are tingling! And he's not able to actually go after the senzu bean, and ultimately, it's down to Pan to be the one to catch it before it then gets lost forever in the mighty crevasses of the remainder of the Red Ribbon base. And that's cool! That was so handy! It's not dumb! It actually was kind of good. And it was a little bit of music at the beginning because you just get, here, take the senzu bean, Gohan. It's on the tip of my finger. That's amusing without even trying to be. Just the situation of a giant Orange Piccolo. That was really funny too. But I just feel like this makes me feel happy. This is a happy moment that the manga was able to provide something of benefit that actually inarguably improved the contents that we got in the movie. I am so thrilled by this, and therefore, I feel positive emotions about this chapter. Of course, this doesn't really get you to the point that everyone was expecting, that being the advent of Gohan Beast. We don't really get to that point. We get to the point when everyone's trying to regroup and going on for the final push before Gohan then snaps and we get Gohan Beast, which most likely will happen in the next chapter. But throughout my reading of the chapter, I was starting to think, are we actually going to see Gohan Beast? Because I'm not seeing any catalyst right now. Because Gohan, in this entire chapter, doesn't act like a buffoon. He actually acts more like a hero and more serious in his ultimate form, which stands to reason, of course, because Toyotaro is a massive Gohan and Piccolo fan. I think that he is able to integrate both he and Piccolo together better than Toriyama could, because originally, Toriyama wanted to make the Dragon Ball superhero movie a Piccolo movie, and was then told to add Gohan in later. So you felt like he had to shoehorn the character in some other ways, but now we're actually starting to see in the middle of the action, Toyotaro doing so in a much better way. this feels a little bit more organic and actually does Gohan a service. Yes, sure, he was acting like a buffoon earlier on in the chapters, and now he's actually starting to act like a proper hero. And the team itself, throughout the entire time we're with Chapter 98, really works well as an entire unit. No one actually feels irrelevant, like everyone thought Android 18. What's she doing here? She didn't really contribute all that much in the actual movie, but now she actually just feels more like a cohesive part of the actual battle. And yes, let's talk about Gamma 2's sacrifice. I was kind of worried when I first saw it that this wouldn't actually translate well to paper, that it wasn't going to be as amazing as the CGI actually was able to convey. But you know what? It actually kind of worked, because Gamma 2 throughout this process actually came off as a real badass. I felt so moved by this, almost as moved as I was when I saw it in animated form. It was such a good moment, and you actually felt like Cell Max was really having to process the entire situation, because in the animated movie, you felt like Cell Max was this big hulking behemoth that was completely unstoppable. But now, I'm actually starting to see more of Cell Max like a proper animal. He's just coming up against all of these annoying things, and you feel like bit by bit, they're slowly actually being able to chip him down. And it feels a bit more realistic and less overpowered. You felt that everyone was actually using their brains and skills and talents. And even I wasn't annoyed by the advent of Fat Gotenks. And it's always nice to see Android 18 use the Kienzan. So it's actually something that she learnt from Krillin, her husband, her very, very loyal husband. I'm still a little bit sore about that, if you cannot possibly tell. But despite all of these really cool additions that they've made, I do feel like they are stalling for something, which makes me really think that we are going to be seeing the end of this particular arc coming around about chapter 100 or so. Therefore, that's going to be around about the time of Christmas, and therefore we'll be going into a brand new arc. So I wouldn't be surprised at all that we get the end of the story of Superhero, and then right at the end, we get some kind of announcement or reveal of the likes of Black Frieza coming back in, because everyone was agog about Black Frieza when he arrived in chapter 87. So to have him come back in, I feel like a lot more people will actually be paying attention to the manga instead of just treading water. And we actually brought this point up while we were talking about the Dragon Ball Daima trailer, why we actually haven't seen an anime portraying the Mora and Granola arcs. Put simply, as Have put it, despite the fact that we've been around Mora and Granola for years, we've actually not got that much content. The anime showrunners could burn through those two arcs in maybe just over a year, perhaps, if they really got going. 30, 60 episodes, those two arcs each. That would then leave the anime team without really much content. And this might mean that we could see some more arcs before we actually get a proper animated series commissioned. So I would imagine that we may get a Black Frieza arc, and then as the fourth arc gets announced and they start moving on it, we will then get an anime announcement sometime in 2025 perhaps, and then maybe by the time the fourth arc ends, we'll then see the Moro arc being animated, and then we can actually get to the idea of having at least an animated Dragon Ball Super, or whatever it's going to be called, running for at least 2 years. As ideally, for those kind of series, anime companies like to have at least 2 years on the actual docket, because otherwise there's not really much point if it's going to be a long-running series, as it is with the shonen anime. But needless to say, the entire chapter actually felt really good. I knew a lot of the things that are about to happen, including the advent of Orange Piccolo remembering that he can actually go giant, which is still funny. But I'm still pleased that the additions they included, even though you could describe it also as padding out the existing material, were actually of benefit. You felt like, hey, I actually feel like this was worth my time, because Krillin actually does more useful things. 18 feels a bit more relevant. Gotenks doesn't annoy me. And Gohan doesn't aggravate me by his butterfingers. And Pan, the way that Pan is useful without even lifting a finger in combat, that was so cool. And you also feel like Toyotaro is really bringing his A game to the paneling. The entire time was quite buttery smooth as I was progressing through the pages. This felt like a really good time, in my opinion, and that I wasn't that annoyed by the fact that this was just a rehash. Toyotaro is great at drawing Cell Max. That just goes without saying. It was so good in the way it was able to be portrayed. I feel quite pleased about this chapter. I would really like to see a brand new story being told in the manga, because that might be partially why Dragon Ball, no one really cares about it, and the hype from Dragon Ball Daima faded away by now. I feel like once we actually get to the end of the superhero arc, we can actually see the comparisons from the movie and the manga properly. This is definitely worth your time, because this actually clears up a lot of the plot points in this part of the movie, which I really didn't agree upon, because they just sort of detracted from the action and were just silly bits of comedy, but then replaced with things which are actually really cool, sweet, wholesome, useful, and also amusing at the same time. Like just tiny little bean on top of Orange Piccolo's finger. That was just really funny. And I don't know, I just feel really pleased. And I feel like now we're actually starting to get to the point of the end game, because this is looking really close. This is the moment when they're all thinking about that final push against Cell Max. We'll probably get Gohan Beast at the end of the next chapter, and then in chapter 100, we'll then get the announcement or a little bit of a teaser about what to expect in the next story. So we've only got 2 more chapters of this rehash, folks. We can actually start to hope we can actually have some proper original content, because I'm now starting to see people missing Granola in a way. After time away, absence has made the heart grow fonder. Maybe he wasn't so bad. And Moro, wow, he's a badass. Wow, I remember back in the day when Moro was around and it was, no one particularly cared that much for the Ram Man, but hey, time makes them even more impressive, I guess. But anyway, that was my review for chapter 98. I think it was actually a really solid chapter, considering what it actually is, and I'm looking forward to actually seeing this coming to an end, but I'm glad that Toriotaro is actually taking this seriously and giving Krillin something to do. But anyway, I'll see you around next month. Catch you later!